Let's talk about Chaetoglobosin, depends on how you want to say it. This is a mycotoxin from Chaetomium or Chaetomium. I probably need to make a decision on that. So I hope that you can join me here for our little lunch and learn on Chaetoglobosin. I'm going to go over just some basic facts, and then I'll field as many questions as I can because I know there's not a lot of good information about this mycotoxin. It is, all the mycotoxins, we're missing a lot of human data, but this one in particular seems to be missed by the indoor inspection side as well as the research side. Somebody's saying, it's the worst, it ruined my health. Absolutely. This is one of them I would put on the higher concern mycotoxins up with trichothecenes as far as how much it can impact a body. So I want to make sure that we go through kind of the things that I've been using with my patients so you understand but also some mechanisms so you kind of understand why are we using certain things. Someone's asking, am I currently taking patients? I am not. I'm out here to educate at this point because my practice is fuller than full. And I am doing peer-to-peer consultations because my mission is to teach more doctors how to manage mold. And even with those, I'm booked out about 1.5 years. So that's why I'm trying to do these so that you are equipped with the knowledge and you can get started until you can get in with a mold treating doctor. If you're looking for a mold literate doctor, please go to my Instagram link, find a mold literate doctor, or on my website at the bottom. There's mold literate doctor link. These are people that took my mold literate training course. There's also Lyme literate, pandas literate links that you can find. The Lyme and the pandas I didn't train. That's not my specialty. So we are talking today about Chaetoglobosin. If you are curious about other mycotoxins that you might be, if you didn't know, I have lunch and learns, if you scroll back, on 5 mycotoxins. We also did one on MPA or mycophenolic acid, which is not a mycotoxin. But it is a mold metabolite, so you need to know about that one. And if I have gotten everything out of my head and organized into a handout, you will find it on my website at drcrista.com/ put in the mycotoxin name, and you'll get a fact sheet and that's downloadable, so you can take notes and everything. Thank you. So you can go quick to your computer and you can go to drcrista.com/ Chaetoglobosin and download the PDF because then you can take notes on that because I'll be talking about that. So Chaetoglobosin, it's from Chaetomium mold. Chaetomium mold is a water lover. The reason why I said I kind of have it in the category of trichothecenes as far as bad guys is that the trichothecenes also come from water-loving molds. Why that's important is that means there is a consistent water exposure in the home, that the aspergillus and penicillium that don't need a ton of water have actually gotten kicked out, and the bad guys have moved in because there's enough water that it's lakefront property. And that means you have a competitive environment, which means you're going to have more mycotoxins made as these molds fight it out. Mycotoxins are made in a competitive environment. So if you're seeing Chaetomium or Chaetoglobosin, it's mycotoxin. If you're seeing trichothecenes, which I will cover in the future, the trichothecenes, that means there's other characters in that environment. But Chaetoglobosin on its own, even if it's not with other mycotoxins, is a bad guy. When you're thinking of this mycotoxin, think of the word resistance. And what that means is that it's helping the Chaetomium mold break through the resistance of our immune system. It's also sharing resistance genes with all the other critters in your microbiome. So if you have candida overgrowth, if you have rhodotorula overgrowth, if you have a bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, those kinds of things, Chaetomium is a very intelligent fungi and can learn how to resist our immune system, and then will share that intel with the other critters. So it's resistance from two sides. It's like we get more resistant species, and also our immune system, Chaetomium is resistant to our immune system kicking it out. I can spell it, you bet. So it's, I'm going to just read it so I get it right. Chae, so that's a weird one, Toglobosin. So that's Chaetoglobosin. Not many of the body tests test for this yet. I'm praying they all add it because it is commonly found in a water damaged building. Guess where else it's found? It's found in refrigerator filters. If you haven't seen my Drink Ice Water, Get Dementia video, I tested 3 different filters, not in moldy buildings, verified because, you know, I had mold in a building, in a home before, so this was a different home. When I posted that to YouTube, there was somebody that posted below in the comments that said, I am in water, filtration or water management. And he said, this is a really big problem for us in managing healthy water for municipalities. So it's that kind of pink slime. If you haven't cleaned your toilet in a while, you know, you get that little like pink slime around the top. That's very similar, and it could be Chaetomium actually there too. There's other bacteria that do that. It does tend to be faint pink, but it will change even to a black mold color depending on what it's eating. So if it's eating something that has more melanin in it, in the cellulose, then it will, like the bark instead of the wood, which is a lot of times some of the OSB board, that's what they're just chewing up, bark and wood. And so then it can get that more melanin color and can turn black. So never can you tell what a mold is by the color. So it always has to be diagnosed with good diagnostics, with sending it in for DNA speciation. Chaetomium likes wood-based materials, drywall, wallpaper, textiles. There is reports of it growing on concrete and even growing on plastic if the plastic is consistently humid. It doesn't even have to be wet. It can just be humid. So we have very few human studies on this. Some of our mycotoxins have been classified as like carcinogens by the World Health Organization or by the International Cancer Agency. This one is just sort of been left, nobody's talking about it. But animal studies do kind of show us some of its things that it can do. So animal studies report that it harms and actually kills the cells of liver, pancreas, and kidneys. One of my, good morning from Australia. One of my favorite things then, if we see that happening where there's damage to the actual organs, a lot of times if you can take those organs in a supplement or eat it in your food using clean, organic, grass-fed, pasture-raised, not just grass-fed, grain-finished, because the grains are full of mycotoxins that they feed animals anyway. But like pasture-raised all the way to the end, if you can ingest those, liver, pancreas, kidneys, which you can get those in supplement form as glandulars from companies like Priority One, Standard Process, Ancestral Supplements, those kinds of places and sources. That's a way to kind of nourish in a whole food way those organs. So that is one of the things that I'm tending to look for. You know, if somebody has been made toxic with Chaetomium or Chaetoglobosin, I'm assessing, you know, I'm looking at kidney function, liver function, pancreas function, and if there's any limitation in either of those, I'm using glandulars to support those. What else? Chaetoglobosin is moderate, meaning, you know, significant-ish, activity against cells across a number of cell types. And the main thing is it's blocking something called actin. Now, actin, there's a few different things that make that important. So actin and myosin is part of skeletal muscle. So a lot of people who've been exposed to Chaetoglobosin get skeletal muscle wasting. So it's one of those things that even if you're working out, you start to lose weight and it's the wrong kind of weight. It's the muscle weight, not the fat weight. So you can become thin, like skinny fat. You can get thinner, but you're losing the wrong type of tissue. The other thing that actin is responsible for is a bunch of cellular structures in the respiratory tract. Especially Chaetoglobosin is toxic to the nasopharyngeal cavity. and that's where we're breathing it in. They found in animal studies that even if you fed an animal half of their diet as Chaetoglobosin, straight Chaetoglobosin, they don't really get all that much affected. So we know it's not a big feed-borne or food-borne toxin. This is an inhalational toxin, and it's particularly damaging the nasopharyngeal cavity. So for this one, a lot of times also I will use Lactobacillus sakii or casei, which are the flora, the beneficial flora of our nose. I will use that to support the terrain. I know, now you're worried you have this. And no, real-time does not test for it yet. No, unfortunately. Okay, I'm just trying to keep up with some questions too. All right, so what else can I tell you? We support the nasopharyngeal cavity with supporting the probiotics of the nose, and also sometimes people need, if you get a lot of nosebleeds with your exposure, I often will use humic acid in the nose. And while this has been taken off the market, the Ion Biome, Intelligence of Nature, Dr. Zach Bush's nasal spray that they got picked on and got taken off the market. A lot of times we will just use their gut version of that and put it into a neti pot, or even just swab in the nose because it's the same humic acid. So that will beef up the terrain. Somebody asked, how do I get rid of mold in my nose? If all you're doing is the anti stuff, which is important, and a lot of times people don't go high enough on that, but you're not doing the support stuff, you're not necessarily supporting the natural microbiome of the nose. You can get Lactobacillus sakii from a company called Nasobiotech. I think it's, I'm blanking on how to get the website, Epicure or something like that. You can also get it as Lanta sinus. So there's a way to get those. Okay, so cytotoxicity, meaning cell toxicity, also to the reproductive system, mitochondria, thyroid, and then impairs cell division. And it in particular has bad effects on the bone marrow. So a lot of times what we will see is people start to have like a low white count, low red count, just total counts are starting to kind of creep below normal with Chaetoglobosin. One thing it really messes up is it messes up SIRS labs. So CIRS or SIRS, a lot of times what we're doing is, well, not me, I'm not trained as a SIRS doctor, but I will see SIRS doctors running a TGF beta. Well, if you have Chaetoglobosin, it lowers TGF beta. So it makes that test unreliable. That's kind of one of the reasons why that's not one of the tests that I look at. Also, like, lots of things will raise TGF beta. So it's a non-specific marker, but if somebody is looking at your panel and it's a SIRS lab and you have, high of the other things, like VEGF or whatever, and then the TGF beta is normal and they're like, well, maybe it's not SIRS. Well, maybe it's SIRS with Chaetoglobosin. Okay, symptoms. We see, did I cover all the things I wanted to cover? Oh yeah, it's becoming, Chaetoglobosin is so, it's not being used in like human studies of how bad it is for people. It's being used in cancer and in infectious disease. They're studying it to the hilt because it's so good at killing cells. That's stuff we're breathing in. So yeah, they're testing it in oncology. They're testing it in infectious disease against resistant species. But unfortunately, when they actually take it from the petri dish to the body, so they're testing on animals, it's fatal when they put it in the blood. So eeks, right? So this is one we want to get out. Is the Chaetoglobosin bundle safe for teenage kids? Yes. I wouldn't use it with like under 6. We need to be kind of careful of the bile. Okay, so hey John, nice to see you. All right, so there have been 200 metabolites from Chaetomium. The only one we're measuring is Chaetoglobosin. So there's probably other things if you have Chaetomium in a building, Chaetomium, that your body might be having difficulty with. But so what we know is some of them are alkaloids, which are toxins called indole alkaloids. So there are some things that we know that those cause. One of the things we know that indole alkaloids cause is sensitivity to other alkaloid containing foods. So if you're one of those people that is sensitive to coffee, caffeine, tea, cacao, so cocoa, tomatoes, potatoes. Tomatoes have tomatine, potatoes have solanine. If you're sensitive to those, that may be a little hint that you're having some of that alkaloid toxicity, and it could be Chaetoglobosin. Okay, so symptoms: rapid aging, and that could be all manner of aging on the skin, that kind of thing. Eye, skin, and respiratory irritation, skin rashes and skin thinning, chronic sinusitis. We talked about toxicity specifically to the nasopharyngeal cavity. Chronic productive cough, meaning you're coughing stuff up. So some of the mycotoxins cause chronic dry cough. This one in particular is a productive cough. You're making junk. It's coming up. It's not paralyzing. Well, actually, I think it does paralyze the cilia. I'm sorry, I should have gotten that. There are a couple of mycotoxins that will make the cilia, the little fingers that bring mucus up, paralyzed. And actually, I do think that is one of the things that you can do, because you wouldn't get a productive cough otherwise. Okay, fatigue, brain fatigue, cognitive fatigue. Your brain just runs out of gas or out of fuel, so you have to break up your thinking times into chunks and then rest in between. We talked about sarcopenia. That means poor muscle tone and loss of muscle mass, muscle weakness, exercise intolerance, hypothyroidism. We talked about the cytotoxicity or cell toxicity of the thyroid cells, recurrent infections, especially the skin, lungs, and any mucosal surface, low white count, low platelets, enlarged spleen. So when your bone marrow gets suppressed by this one, the spleen goes on high alert and goes and starts to work harder, and then the spleen can enlarge while it's being the factory. It takes over for the bone marrow's deficiency. You can get chemical sensitivity, unstable blood glucose, and reduced sperm motility. So that actin blockade that it's doing is getting in the way of rapidly dividing cells and high energy cells, which sperm are that. They're rapidly dividing and they're high energy. So we see a lot of male-related infertility related to Chaetoglobosin. Okay, we talked about inhalation is the way to get it in. And then the last thing to talk about is how we get it out. So I've scared you with all the stuff to get it in, or that what it's doing to you. And yes, tomatoes are high in oxalates, but if you have that category of things altogether that you're sensitive to, that's an alkaloid thing more than an oxalate thing. Let's see. Do you have the symptoms that I just described? You have Chaetoglobosin. Hi, Rachel. Nice to see you. Getting improvements. Yay! All right, there's a question about binders. I'm not going to talk about black mold. I'm going to talk about Chaetoglobosin today because there's so much to talk about. I don't have anything on slime molds today. And the cough heightens when you eat. Yes, that's kind of a keynote symptom for Chaetoglobosin. Because the cilia are paralyzed, when you eat, you get more mucus coming to the esophagus and also to the respiratory passage, because it's right there next door, and you will get more of that mucus that you have to be coughing up because the cilia aren't working. And yeah, a low oxalate diet when you have oxalates is great, but the reason you have oxalates typically is because of the yeast overgrowth. There's very, 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 very few people who have genetically high oxalates. The majority of people, if you're having high oxalates, it's because of yeast overgrowth. And the sooner you can get on antifungals and knock back that yeast burden, the better. Okay, so no problem. Today we have a topic of Chaetoglobosin. All right, what do we do to get it out? So one of the things that we know is that it's a completely non-polar molecule, which means there's no part of it that is water soluble. It's all fat soluble, which means we go completely through the bile pathway to get it out. There's no water solubility. It can go through the liver and get some water solubility and come out of the kidneys, which is why we can see it on a urine test. But a much better way to find Chaetoglobosin is through the blood, because most of it is fat soluble, which is why you can get it through the inhalation so well. It also can cross the blood-brain barrier. It's one of the few, because it's non-polar, has no part of it that's water soluble. Most other mycotoxins have a lot of lipid solubility and a little bit of water solubility, but this one is completely fat soluble, which means bile is the way that we get it out. So this is one of the few times, if I'm seeing a high Chaetoglobosin with all the risk factors we just talked about, this is one of the few times I might go directly to a pharmaceutical bile sequestrant like colesevelam. I typically use that 2 times a day away from food and other supplements, and then I only use it for a month or less, because these binders that some of you guys are getting put on for 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, they cause massive nutrition deficiencies of fat-soluble nutrients, phosphatidylcholine, CoQ10. Phosphatidylcholine builds your cell membrane. It builds your mitochondrial membrane. If you're not nourishing that nutrient while you're on a bile sequestrant, you're going to be putting your cells into a PC or phosphatidylcholine deficiency, which makes your cells harder, and that means they're not as fluid. The cell membrane isn't as fluid, so then you can't get nutrients in and waste products out. So I don't use biosequestrant pharmaceuticals for longer than a month typically when I use them, but this is one of the mycotoxins that I would sometimes with patients start immediately with the drug. If you can't get the drug, no problem, because there are plenty of ways to get bile sequestered or grabbed so that you don't recycle it. That's what a bile sequestrant is. We're very, very good at recycling bile, which is great in a non-toxic world, because it's how we keep our vitamin D, vitamin A for immunity, our vitamin E for our blood vessel protection, and skin, our vitamin K to help put calcium into our bones and teeth and not into kidney stones, our CoQ10 for mitochondrial energy, our phosphatidylcholine for cell membrane health. So we don't want to deplete your body of all those things too much. So we want to sequester some bile to get the toxins out, but not so much that we get in the way of you taking back in those nutrients. So how do you do it if you can't take colesevelam, which is called Welchol? You can take fiber. Insoluble fiber has been shown in many studies for people who are missing a gallbladder and they have too much bile to be a very good bile grabber and stop things like bile dump diarrhea. That would be psyllium husk, that would be flaxseed, chia seed, bran, and now, tricky thing, if you have SIBO, you can't do those. So what do? You can do sunflower seed, pumpkin seed, and sesame seeds, grind them up, take a 1/4 teaspoon of the finely ground seeds and sprinkle that over your food every time you eat. There's your binder. Studies show that if you use 2 to 4 tablespoons of psyllium husk fiber, which you can get organically and you can get finely ground, you want finely ground, it's the surface area that grabs the bile. So the more fine you grind them, the better. So if you have a coffee grinder for those seeds, just run it, shake it, run it. You want it to be pulverized and powdery. Good, I'm glad this is helping. So if studies show 2 to 4 tablespoons of psyllium husk grabs bile at about 35 to 40% of the strength of cholestyramine and colesevelam. Guess what else you can use? Steamed kale, mustard greens, and collard greens, about 13% as effective as cholestyramine and colesevelam. Now, does it take a slower time to get it out? Yes, but we're holding on to nutrients and we're nourishing your microbiome with some of its favorite foods. In the case of the fiber, we're feeding the microbiome and it's taking out vitamin A from that fiber. Vitamin A is in the husk and the hulls of things. And in the case of the greens, we're getting the short chain fatty acids and the butyrate that your gut loves. So yes, coffee enemas are also something. So if somebody can't tolerate the colesevelam in that first month, or if I'm concerned that they're already pretty nutrition depleted, I'll get them started on food-based binders. Now remember, that's not just eating it. You have to take it as a supplement. You need to add it in addition to a good diet. I'll do that with coffee enemas weekly until we see that number come down. And usually it's coffee enemas for 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. And no, you don't have to take the food-based binders away from meals. That's the lovely thing. And really, you should be taking the cholestyramines and the cholecystolan with meals because that's when the bile is released. So you want to catch it like a little bit before the meal. But a lot of times we're taking our supplements at the same time as a meal. So you're in this game of like, what do I got to eat like 8 times a day and then not eat for 4 hours somehow so I can get my drug in. You know, it's a little tricky. The food-based ones you can take with food. So it just, because that's when bile is secreted. Alrighty, so what else can I tell you? Yes, indeed, it does paralyze cilia, which is the things that move mucus out. So you can get congested sinuses, sinusitis, clogs. Again, things like steam inhalations if you want. I have a video on my website of how to do an herbal steam inhalation that will help break up some of that mucus. And things like thyme have been shown to increase the action of the cilia fingers. So you can do many things at once. If you do a thyme steam inhalation, you're getting the antimicrobial, biotic, antimicrobial, fungal, you're getting cilia activity, and you're getting the steam to break up the mucus. So you're nourishing the whole story with just a simple, relaxing steam inhalation. They're just lovely. Can I take binders while being in the moldy home? Yes, and you should, because that's a good way to get out what's coming in. But I do, when people are in mold, sometimes if we go too aggressively with binders, we will start your body into a detox mode while it's also accumulating, and the body does not like to do that. It has this meter of like, it's either going to be in accumulation mode or it's going to pop over to detox mode. But if you're accumulating and you're pushing detox, it can push detox too hard and then you get more symptoms. So you got to go really kindly and gently with binders when you're in mold. I don't know what AC is, so if you can spell that out, that would be lovely. Okay, so what else? Food-wise, organic dairy. Dairy has some activity that combats the Chaetoglobosin. Cruciferous vegetables, what that's doing is a NRF2 activator, so it's enhancing cellular resistance. And 2 amino acids, which is so... A lot of times I would use these IV because people were having symptoms of collagen breakdown and things like that from we didn't know what. And then when we found out it was mold, it was like, oh, this is Chaetoglobosin. That's what this is. So 2 amino acids, proline and lysine, are often, or tyrosine, also lysine. Those 3 help with Chaetoglobosin, but those 2, proline and tyrosine, I was putting in people's IVs to help with the tissue part that I didn't know had mold illness. And then when I dug more into mold and I was like, bing, okay, all my Chaetoglobosin people need proline and tyrosine. Tyrosine for the thyroid contribution, and proline, these are 2 amino acids that help with the pathway that Chaetoglobosin is invading or stopping. The kind of exercise you need when you have Chaetoglobosin is resistance, resistance, resistance. No aerobic, because you're going to cause more thinning of the muscle. So resistance training, heavy weights, slow negative. So you do, let's say a bicep curl. You're taking the bicep curl up and then you go slowly on the out so that we're building and stressing that muscle. Anything that progressively increases the resistance over time is going to help with rebuilding the muscle. You're not going to get anywhere with aerobic exercise. We talked about binder, optimize your fat-soluble nutrients because it is a completely lipid-soluble molecule and it's bumping out your A, D, E, and K, CoQ10, phosphatidylcholine, essential fats. Those are all of the things that Chaetoglobosin is bumping off. I like to use something called bioplasma cell salts with people with Chaetoglobosin because it's changing the actin makes up the skeleton, the inner matrix of the skeleton of the cell. So if Chaetoglobosin is impairing that skeleton, the cell can actually get like, it can kind of wilt. So when we use the bioplasma cell salts, it brings structure back to the cells. So then the cells can take in more, they can hold water better, and they can exchange nutrients and waste products. I find this to be really profound for helping patients with Chaetoglobosin. Other ideas is immune supportive things. So we talked about the glandulars. If there's liver challenge, kidney challenge, or pancreas challenge, everybody that has Chaetoglobosin, I use some sort of immune, bone marrow, innate immune system support. Larch is my favorite tree to do this. It's a plant. This is not all in my book. I'm sorry. This is stuff after my book. So somebody had asked me, hey, can you tell me how you do precision mycotoxin treatment? And so this is what I'm adding. This is all coming in my updates in mold course for practitioners. It's going to be at the practitioner level, but if you're game, anyone's welcome to take that. But again, I have a lot of this as fact sheets if you didn't catch us in the beginning. If you put in drcrista.com/ and then put the name of the mycotoxin, I have fact sheets and what I'm using with my patients. So we'll talk about larch, and then is there anything else I wanted to make sure and talk about? We talked about the rest of it. Larch is a bone marrow nourisher, and nourishes the branch of the immune system that's specific to mold and mycotoxins and mast cells. It has arabinogalactans, which is just basically a fancy word for the sugars that the immune system likes, but they're not sugary like they're gonna like feed yeast. I also then will, if somebody does have low platelets or low white count, I will add thymus gland as a glandular. So as you see, I'm using a lot of animal products with this particular mycotoxin. I've had vegans have a very hard time healing from this mycotoxin, just because there are these proteins that get stopped by this mycotoxin. So I'm using the proline and tyrosine rich foods. That's the muscle, the gland, and the skin from animals. I'm using a lot of glandulars from clean animals, and I'm finding that stabilizes people a lot better. If you're vegan and you can't do that, in addition to the larch, you'll need astragalus root to even bump up the immune system enough to get ahead of it. And then antifungals. So if you have my book and you know the peel the orange, where all this fits that we just talked about is the center part before the fight. It's the protect and repair steps. You still need the antifungals to kick back Chaetomium. And Chaetomium, remember, is a resistance king. So if you're using antifungals, you need to combine with garlic, which prevents resistant species. Garlic has been shown in studies to help with drug resistance across all antifungal drugs. The fluconazole, itraconazole, nystatin, amphotericin, voriconazole, all kinds. Garlic is the thing across all those drug classes to prevent drug resistance. So they use together very well, and I have been lucky enough to help develop a product called Garlic Assist for this very thing. Okay, I think we are past our time for lunch and learn. I hope that I got to enough questions. We will be talking about trichothecenes in 2025. I'll try to do the main ones that you guys are seeing on your lab tests, like fumonisin, DON, T2 toxin, those kinds of things, and help you guys out. So stay tuned. I will announce it on Instagram when I'm going to be doing my next lunch and learn. And in 2025, I'm doing master classes that are interactive, so we can talk and we can I can support you in any way that I can, since my practice is overfill. And they're going to be very topic focused. So if you're not on my newsletter, get on my newsletter. That's where we'll be announcing those and the dates for those. So take care, you guys. Conquer mold. Take back your health. Mwah. Bye.